Okay, let me just let one more person in off the wait list. Angie, if you could watch the waiting room for me while I do my little beginning spiel, that would be so great.
Will do.
Thank you
Will
so
do.
much. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ellie Garrity, and I'm the Director of Alumni Career Programs at the University of Maryland Alumni Association. Angie and I are so happy that you're able to join us for today's webinar, Your Key to Positive Productivity, with our Coach's Corner endorsed coach, Angie Dubransky. This webinar is presented in partnership with the Coach's Corner program, the UMD Alumni Association's newest professional development resource accessible to all Terps. You'll learn more about it later. We have a lot of information to cover today, but we will be taking questions throughout the webinar, so feel free to use the Zoom panel at the bottom of your screen to type in through the chat. You can also use the reaction buttons if you have questions to raise your hand, give a thumbs up, or even a smiley face. This webinar is being recorded, so by participating, you acknowledge your consent to your image, likeness, or voice being recorded. And then speaking of recording, a recording of today's webinar will be sent to the email that you used to register for today's event. Okay, so Angie Dubransky is an award-winning coach, trainer, author, and speaker who shows people how to reach radical success using the success system in their lives and businesses. She empowers business owners and executives to build outstanding companies, achieve their vision, and impact the world. She coaches people and teams worldwide via Zoom's magic, runs transformational retreats in Baja, Mexico, spends much time at the beach, lucky Angie, and travels the world experiencing its wonders. Her book, Life Lessons in Success, Wisdom to Win the Game of Life, is a collection of true stories of achievers who turn obstacles into dreams. She and her husband currently split their time between DC, Daytona Beach, and Todos Santos, Mexico. All right, Angie, I'll pass it up to you to get things started.
Thanks, Ellie. I forgot I had that line about the beach in there. I want you guys to know I have almost hit my maximum tan, which is very exciting for me. It's a goal that I have every year to naturally reach maximum tan, and I'm almost there. So anyway, just before I sort of share my screen, I'd like you guys to feel free to participate at whatever level you're comfortable. So you can have your cameras on. I love seeing your faces if I can. You can feel free to leave them off if you don't want to. If you have a question, you can type it into the chat, and Ellie will keep an eye on that for me, or you can even interrupt me. Reactions are on, so you can, raise your hand and, send hearts or frowns or whatever you want. Hopefully they're all positive, but the more you participate, the more that you get out of it. So I just want to encourage everybody to participate again at whatever level you feel comfortable doing. So with that, let me bring up my screen. Make sure I didn't try when we were testing this to make sure I had my controls to forward it. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, welcome to Your Key to Positive Productivity. I've been a coach for 15 years, and everybody just wants to be, the biggest question is, how do I get more done with less time, right? Everybody's overworked and overstressed, and they can't seem to get their task list done. And there's about 1 million books written on productivity. And, you've got David Allen, the sort of guru of them all. Getting Things Done is his book. If you've ever read that, it's impossible to enact his whole system, but pieces of it will change your life. But I started realizing something, that there's actually, it's not what we do really that adds to our productivity. It's really how we do it. Oh, I can go. So that was just me testing real quick to make sure I have my controls. All right. So just to give you a little agenda, we're spending, about an hour, give or take, together today. I'll give a little introduction about who I am. We'll talk about, productivity and really what it is and how to achieve it. I'll talk about the idea of building positive habits rather than techniques. I'll lay out what is this whole practice that I teach. I will give you 3 to 5 easy habits to implement now, depending on where the time goes. And then we'll have a little Q&A at the end. So I'm Angie Dubransky. I call my business Rad Strategic Partners, and radical business, radical life really is my motto. I think that I live a radical life because I live in 3 places. I try to spend time at the beach. I work in the virtual world, and I have a life very much of my own design, a life in business, which fulfills, my needs and desires without excuse for what anybody else thinks that I should have, or be. So it's kind of radical. And every time I introduce myself, the introduction is always a little different. And this time I thought I'm just going to start accumulating all of the words that describe who I am or who I've ever been, right? So, I'm a coach and a speaker and an author. I'm an alumni of the university. I'm a proud Terp. I'm a wife and a mother, a business owner, a fashionista. I still, I think Ellie knows this, that I'm wearing heels right now. I dress fully every day, even when I never leave the house. That's my 20 years in the fashion industry. I love the beach. I've been a manager and a leader. I've been an employee and employer. I've been a retailer and a wholesaler and a buyer, right? I'm a creator. I build networks. I was an athlete. I'm a daughter. I was a caretaker of my father. But at its heart, I'm really an adventurer. And the people that I love to help are fellow adventurers who are living their own life and trying to find success. And, I partner with people to teach them that. So to find the way to create their own radical life and radical business. So what is productivity, right? At its very heart, it's the difference between input and output. And in our lives, the way that plays out is there's days, and tell me if you feel this, right? There's days that you go to work and you sit in your chair all day, and at the end of the day, you go, I didn't get anything done. The whole day was a slog. You just dragged yourself through it. You couldn't check off that to-do list. You just couldn't get things done. And then other days, at the end of the day, you look up, you can't believe it's already 5 o'clock or 2 o'clock or 7 o'clock, whatever time you leave work, and you just can't even believe the mountain of work that you accomplished that day. Totally different output for really the same amount of input of time, right? Time and theoretically energy. So what is the difference, right? How do we influence our own productivity? How do we get more output from the same or less input? Because I don't know about you all, but what I hear from my clients over and over again is they don't have enough time to do all the things that they need to do. And so really the truth is we need to figure out how to get more output from less input. And that's what I'm going to teach you some of today. So radical productivity is flow. It is that state of being where time flies and creativity is almost effortless. Raise your hands if you've heard of flow. Who's heard of flow? See a few coming out there, right? So flow is there's been a lot written about it recently being the last few years, and we've all experienced flow. And it is that moment where we're just totally engaged in an activity, fully absorbed by it to the point that our effort is almost effortless and the time just flies by. And all the studies of flow, they talk about it's about doing what you do best when you do it, right? And there's all sorts of books written about how to find your right career that puts you in flow. The most successful people in business are people who spend more of their time in flow than out. Because one of the secrets of business, particularly if you're a business owner, is that you're not always in flow because you have to do things that are outside of your core competency, but you want to spend more time there. When you are in flow, you are radically productive, right? You just get amazing things done. I've sort of started to believe that you can create flow. It's not just find your flow, it's create it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So if you do any research on how to increase my productivity, there is any number of tips and tricks to do. And these are just, a few samplings of the millions of tips for being more productive. So stop multitasking, take breaks, right? Use apps, create deadlines, make sure you get a good night's sleep, exercise, turn off your phone, use the 2-minute rule, make a must-do list. There's just a million things. If you've read, and I don't know how many of you have read David Allen's book, Getting Things Done, which is like the ultimate productivity book. It's insane, right? Like, it's a book worth reading because there's parts of it that have changed my life, but it's insane the amount of tips. And if there's this many different tips, what I'm going to tell you is I don't think anybody really knows how to permanently increase productivity, right? Like, I think a lot of these things help, but they're not really solving the core problem. They're sort of like the medicine for your cold, right? It's treating the symptoms of the cold, but it's not actually curing the cold. And so what I want to talk with you today as we get to it is more about how to cure the cold rather than how to treat the symptoms. So what are the productivity killers, right? Well, some of them, they're multitasking, their lack of sleep, their distractions, their perfectionism, they're saying yes, their lack of goals, too much demand, ineffective tools, no system, taking no breaks, taking too many breaks. Who knows what the right number of breaks is? You know what now my number one productivity killer is? Boredom. It's boredom. It's lack of interest. It's when I really don't want to do what the things that I need to do. I wonder if people could just take a moment, and if you are actively here, type into the chat what your number one productivity killer is. What gets in the way of you being this, effective, output producing, flow generating person? Yeah, I see Javier's boredom as well. Overwhelmed, too much to do, don't know where to start is a big one, particularly for people in business. Multitasking, yes. Overwhelmed, stress, lack of sleep. And these things are all related: too much demand, priority, anxiety, right? And you can see how they're kind of all related. Micromanagement. Oh, that's a good one, Luis. I talk to a lot of managers about how their micromanagement is getting in the way. So yeah, it is there's just too much, and I don't know where to start, and I'm not fully engaged, right? And I don't know what to do first, and I'm completely overwhelmed. And what we're doing, no end goal, right? We're sort of actually activating, the idea that we're always in this fight or flight mode, right? All of this stress and anxiety and overwhelm and the, full email box first thing in the morning, it's sort of activating our fight or flight. And most of us are fleeing, right? Because we tried to fight and we realized we can't get it done. So what we need to do is really take more control of our own inner self in a way to create a more just productive being in general. So this thought that I've been experimenting with for years with my clients to just amazing results comes from Martin Seligman. So this is Dr. Martin Seligman. If you have never heard of him, he is basically the founder of positive psychology. I met him a couple of years ago. He was 95 at the time that I met him, which is super cool because he said that the super cool thing about practicing psychology for over 50 years is that you get to learn when you're wrong, right? Right. So it makes him very wise at this point. And what positive psychology asks, and what I ask from a productivity perspective, is what if we focused on changing ourselves instead of changing the tasks or the way we approached our tasks, right? Because this is actually the heart of positive psychotherapy. So for those of you who haven't studied psychology or psychotherapy or coaching, it is this idea that therapy in its traditional sense is about determining, your past trauma that's getting in your way and relieving that trauma, working through it, resolving it, healing it, whatever you need to do. But positive psychotherapy and coaching is really not. It's about just saying, well, this is who you are. And what if you taught you some practices and habits and things you could do that just got you better results? And through his 50 years of work, what they have found is there are 14 specific interventions that people can do that do very reliably, and research proves it, make you happier, more fulfilled. And then oddly enough, a side effect of being happier and more fulfilled is incredibly increased levels of productivity. Because think about what a lot of our answers were about what gets in the way of our productivity: boredom, anxiety, overwhelm, lack of sleep, right? Those are all the opposite of being happy, fulfilled, satisfied, right? Or maximized. And so when I met him and I, went to a few of his things, and I've done some work and read his books and been through his textbook, and I started to realize that most of what he was talking about can actually be applied directly in a business or work sense to get much better results, both from yourself or your team or your whole company. Because if you look at the incredibly productive companies out there, the Googles of the world, the Apples of the world, the innovators who at their time, FedEx, people like that. They may not everybody's an innovator anymore, but if you look at them in the beginning, it was a bunch of highly engaged, really motivated, totally fulfilled, goal-oriented people working together to create amazingness, right? And so I started this experiment of what if I took his concepts of psychotherapy and applied them to business. And really the results that I started getting from clients that I've had for many, many years was dramatically different, even with just some very small changes. And so that's when I developed what I call the practice, which is basically these things that you can do, which are ways that you can increase your productivity, your fulfillment, your results, right? And, your happiness at work. And the 14 of them are, and I'm just going to go over them quickly because I'm going to teach you, let's see where we are, probably 5, we'll see, maybe 3 of them a little bit more in depth, and maybe we'll break out a little bit too, Ellie, and talk about them when I go through them in depth. But the 14 of them are: lead with our strengths, apply our acquired wisdom, continually improve, grow with experience, forgive and move forward, go for the gusto, appreciate the small success, see the solutions, find opportunity in failure, slow down to enjoy more, build positive relationships, communicate effectively, practice altruism, and connect meaning with purpose. Those are my words, by the way, not his, but they do directly correlate with all of his concepts. And what's really interesting, if you're a fan of the early work of Napoleon Hill, as I am, his law of success in 16 lessons, many of these are actively aligned, and I'll show you how they are. I love that if you do a lot of reading on how to find success, and success by most people in this work is defined sort of by the way Zig Ziglar defines it, which is the maximum utilization of one's gifts and abilities. So if you define your success as just creating the best life you can with given who you are and where you are, right? The people that talk about the key to making that happen, if you read all the work, they're all talking about the same principles, by the way, they just use different language. And it's because they work, right? And so you just have to find the way to make them applicable to you. So let's dive into, I thought this would stop moving. There we go. One of them, lead with strengths, which also directly correlates with Napoleon Hill's law of success number 5, which is self-confidence. And an interesting thing is this: most of us at work, particularly if we're managers or leaders, we are trying to mitigate the weaknesses of our team. But all research shows that you get better results by maximizing strengths rather than minimizing weaknesses. If you maximize strengths, the weaknesses will take care of themselves. And knowing and understanding your strengths and using them accordingly is the same as self-confidence. Self-confidence is not this hubris of, I think I'm great. And, self-confidence is knowing who you are, knowing what your strengths are, right? And being willing to be out there authentically leading with them. When they did the research on flow, when we're not in flow is when we're doing things that are not naturally easy for us, right? So when we're not using our strengths, it's really important to get in touch with what your strengths are. And this is really interesting. I have a workbook that I have my clients go through, and they test their strengths with a number of different strengths tests that are out there. And then they have 2 different people observe them and tell them what they think their strengths are. And it's really interesting. I mean, some people are really aligned, like, they know what their strengths are. Their team identifies those as the same strengths. But other people, like, they think they know what their strengths are, but other people see a completely different view. And so it's actually worth doing some work around determining, what are your real strengths and using them to the best effect. When I do this work deeper, one of the things that we talk about is that all strengths are also weaknesses. So your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness. So I think we'll do a quick exercise around this in a minute. So I'll give you instructions, and then Ellie, we can break them out into a couple of breakout rooms, and we'll just give them a couple of minutes. But I want you to, before I'm going to give you instructions, think about what you think one of your greatest strengths are. We all have, 3, 4, 5 real strengths. So just think about what you think one of your greatest strengths is. So I will tell you that I believe, and it's true, one of my greatest strengths is integrity. I'm like a super honest person. I'm real straight with people. I always tell people directly. I don't beat around the bush. I don't really lie to them. I'm empathetic, so I don't hurt people with my truth. But I'm real honest, and I live in real integrity. And that obviously is a great thing in business, right? Because my clients know they can trust me. I close sales pretty easily because I act with integrity, right? It benefits me in many ways. So it's a real strength. But it's also a real weakness, right? Because I judge people sometimes too harshly when I think they're out of integrity, right? Because I'm holding myself to this standard that other people may not hold. And all of a sudden, they make some silly little slight that they may not have even meant or realized. And I think they're out of integrity. And then I've got a whole story in my head that gets in my way of interacting with them, right? So, integrity is a great strength, but it's also a great weakness when you take it too far. So why don't we do a fun little exercise, because I think help people to really get in touch with this. Again, Ellie, break people out. What do we have? About 20 people. So 4 or 5 people in a room.
Sure.
And yeah. And we just, go around, maybe, say hello to the room, and, whoever's, let's see, whoever has the shortest hair goes first. And really talk about what do you think your greatest strength is, and how does it help you? And how does it get in your way? And just a quick, 30 seconds to a minute. My greatest strength is integrity. It helps me because people can trust me. It gets in the way because I lose trust with other people because of it. Great. So sound
All
good?
Right. Opening up the rooms now. And how long, Angie, will they have here?
Let's give them 5 minutes. So, because that way that just, keep them from talking too long.
Great. Okay. All right. Heading to breakout rooms now.
All right.
Let me
workshop with them to recognize. It's really important to recognize that our strengths are also our weaknesses. They are what gets in our way as well. And so while we should, proudly, love who we are and lead with our strengths, we need to recognize that they get in the way too. So, all right. So that's the practice of leading with your strengths. The next one is appreciate the small success, which is the practice of gratitude. And there's just, this is big in that there's just a lot of talk about gratitude lately out in the world. And I actually think that a lot of people sort of practice gratitude in a way that may not serve them, that holds them back. I have met clients and work with people who were wanting more, but were kind of stuck about where to go for that. And what they would say is, well, I'm just so thankful for everything I have. I don't really need more. And it's I can be grateful for everything that I have and still want more. Right. And so gratitude is about just appreciating, what you do have and what is done for you. And gratitude in the workplace makes a gargantuan difference in the way companies operate. When you actively practice gratitude in the workplace, and the way that gratitude in the workplace shows up is appreciation. It is saying thank you to the people that, that do things for you, right? It is appreciating your team. I will never forget, I had a client and I was interviewing his team. And this one woman told me, she said, he's just the best boss that I've ever had. The best boss I've ever had. I feel so great working here. And, she's super productive because she's very happy at work. And I said, well, what makes him such a great boss, right? What does he do that makes him the greatest boss you've ever had? And she says, about once a week, he goes out for this meeting. And when he comes back, he always brings me a sweet tea from McDonald's, because he knows I love them and there's a McDonald's right on the way. So I just think it's so sweet that he stops and picks and just brings that to me, because that was his way of expressing gratitude. I appreciate you. This small, and for him, it was this is the smallest, simplest thing that I can do to just tell her how much I I appreciate her, right? Because a sweet tea costs $1. It took 5 minutes out of his schedule, right? It wasn't a huge thing, but he built this, made this just like amazing employee because of expressing gratitude. And I had a funny thing. So I get my groceries delivered, and my house is odd. It's very long. It's a ranch style house, and it's sideways on the lot. And I have a breezeway that separates my office from my house, and the kitchen is closest to the breezeway, but the front door is furthest away from the kitchen. So normally when things are being delivered, I try to catch them when they're in the driveway, stop them at the breezeway. But I thought I caught him yesterday, the grocery guy, but I did not. So I ran out and I stopped him, and he said, "Oh, let me get the rest." And then he actually went up to my front porch and picked up all the groceries he had already carried up there and carried them back to the screen door for me, which I thought was incredibly nice. And instead of my normal thank you, which I say to every single person that I interact with that does any small thing for me, because I am grateful all the time, what I said was, "I really appreciate you." Right? It was just like an extra step of gratitude, because I was really, it was such a small thing, but he didn't have to do it. And I was so appreciative that I did not have to carry, those groceries. So if you get in the habit of, saying to those who report to you or those you report to, right? Thank you for, showing up on time. Thank you for replying promptly to my message. Thank you for doing that small favor for me. If you start practicing gratitude, if you have, clients, depending on where you face in your work, if you work with clients, customers, if you genuinely thank them for their business and mean it, right? All these little pieces of gratitude that you start expressing start to affect the way that you feel, right? And they start to affect the way that you interact with people, and they increase your productivity. So appreciate the small successes and practice gratitude. It is if you ask me, of the 14 practices, gratitude is the simplest to practice, because it really just is a matter of looking around and saying, I'm really thankful for what I have. I appreciate what people do for me, right? And I appreciate the output of my input. So, number 3, practicing altruism, which actually is exactly Napoleon Hill's habit of doing more than paid. So here's an interesting statistic for you. In the last 50 years, when actually it's like the last 70 years, because I think they charted it to the 1950s, the practice of altruism in the United States has declined by 50%. So altruism is doing something for another with no expectation of financial reward, right? That's just doing a good thing for the sake of doing a good thing. That's what altruism is. In the workplace, it's doing more than you're paid for, right? It's taking that one extra step, right? It's staying 5 minutes late. It's doing whatever you just need to do to get it done, not expecting that it means anything more than doing a good job. So since the 1950s, the practice of altruism in the United States has dropped by 50%. And they measure this, by the way, by belonging to an attendance at church, belonging to and participation in civic organizations, right? They measure this in belonging, basically membership in altruistic organizations, which has dropped in half. It's really interesting too, because if you look at this sort of measure of happiness has dropped at the almost same pace. So altruism is a long lost art. I can tell you in business, altruism is the absolute secret to success. If you show up every day and you do exactly what's expected of you, you will be a fine employee. And you will not get promoted, and you will not reach the top, and you will not necessarily be given whatever it is that you're trying to find, right? And it's the same as if you own the business. I mean, look, I'm a business coach. I could show up for my clients at their scheduled meeting and give them exactly what they paid for every week, and that would be fine. But it wouldn't make me the great coach that I am, and it wouldn't build the relationships with the clients that I have. And an interesting stat, so my average client stays with me, just so you know, for over 4 years. I think I'm almost 5 years now for the length of engagement with my clients, and it's because we get results. But when I'm in coaching circles and people are talking about the length of their average engagement, it's about 9 months, right? And they're like, "How are you getting 5 years when I'm getting 9 months?" And I'm like, "Well, first of all, I don't sell packages. I just sell monthly retainer. So you already put an end zone on yours." I said, but I know from talking to other coaches that I practice altruism in my practice, because what I say to my clients is, I'm here for you for whatever you need. We have our regular sessions, but you can text me, call me, email me anytime you want, and I'm always there for you. And I mean it. I had a client, this is Wednesday, Monday night, 5:00. I saw a client calling and I was like, nobody would call me at 5:00 unless they were in crisis. And I called, answered the phone. She was in tears. She'd had a big blow to her business, talk her off the ledge, tell her to calm down, don't make any decisions, wait till the morning. And then the next morning did the simplest thing I could ever do. So simple, send her a text. How are you doing? Right. And you just get back this, I so appreciate you checking in on me, right? It's out. You just do it just a little bit more, just do nice things for other people. It changes who you are and it changes the way people interact with you. And it increases your productivity because it lifts you up into this place where you're not bored and you're not anxious and you're not sleeping and you're not, all those things we talked about that really kill our productivity. Being out, put a little more altruism in your life and watch what happens there. All right. So, and one of the other practices is go for the gusto, which is the same as Napoleon Hill's enthusiasm habit. And what this really means, I want to use his language because I love Martin Seligman's language in this. Choose to maximize over satisfy whenever your needs are met. Right? So let's take that on the simplest level. So needs being met for hunger. So we must eat, right? So assume that your refrigerator is full of food. Your basic need for food is met. You can satisfy by, pulling out the simplest thing, right? And eating it in front of the refrigerator, right? So for me, that'd probably be like a piece of string cheese, right? Right? Satisfy my hunger. Or I could maximize, right? By taking that string cheese out and chopping it up and maybe adding a little jam and some crackers and a little, piece of meat and calling it a charcuterie, right? Right? Like I can maximize my snack rather than satisfying. And how many times do you just satisfy what you really want rather than going for the gusto? Like just go for the biggest dream you want. Always make it as big as you want. I always go for the gusto in my life. I think it's part of why I dress every day. Like, guys, seriously, I never leave the house. Well, not never, but I rarely leave the house. My business is completely virtual. And yet almost every day I've got dress, heels, makeup, because that's maximizing who I am, right? I don't need to do it. And I don't do it for anybody other than me. But it is about like, if you can do it well, don't just do it okay. I do think that I get this concept in a really deep level because of the 20 years I spent in fashion, which is about maximizing rather than satisfying. Fashion is all about maximization because if you just needed clothes, you would just have a t-shirt and a pair of pants. I mean, we have the basic clothing, right? Fashion is about taking it to the next step, right? To really maximize how you want to present yourself in the world. So you can do this with every task that you approach. Years ago, I don't know what happened to this guy. He may have aged out at this point, but years ago, there was this guy that worked at the 7-Eleven up the street from me. He's the best 7-Eleven cashier you've ever seen in your entire life. He approached that job with an enthusiastic nature like you can never imagine. I'm not kidding you. Anytime you walk in the 7-Eleven, you got this big cheery hello. He was super friendly when he rang you up and he gave you a nice goodbye when you left. And he was super efficient too, right? And it was like, I love going in here. This guy is like approaching this job in a maximizing way. And then one time I went into I know somebody on here is from Bethesda. I went into the Safeway in Sangamore and there's a cashier there. Her name is Crystal. And I went in and she was the most amazing cashier ever. See, Karen's got her thumbs up, right? She's the most amazing cashier. So friendly, so nice. I saw people actually, there were cashiers who had no lines. She had a line. And there were cashiers who had no line. And I thought that was odd, right? Right. But when I saw how she was interacting with people and how friendly and just, she was totally maximizing cashier, right? Because she could have stood there and just scanned people's groceries and she could have been bored all day. Right. But instead, she's in deep relationship with her customers. By the way, I know her name is Crystal because I was so impressed with what I observed. I post about it on social media and like 100 people from Bethesda all commented, we know her, that's Crystal. Right. So if you want to be memorable, maximize over satisfying. I think the older we get, by the way, the less we, yeah, see, Karen knows, she typed in there, Crystal at Safeway, right? The older we get, the less we go for the gusto. And I think it's a mistake. I think if you want to age well, right, go for the gusto at all times. All right, we'll go in depth on one more, a little bit to tell you about it. Oops, go this way. This is the most important one. Continually improve. Both yourself, both your business, both your habits, your systems. The Japanese have this concept of Kaizen, which is never ending small steps forward toward improvement. If I'm better today than I was yesterday, it's a really great way to live. First of all, you get better and better and better, but also a lot of us have these voices in our head when we mess up, when we make a mistake, when we're not as good as we want to be, when we're not as good as the other guy next door, and we have these voices in our head telling us how bad we messed up. But if we're on continual improvement, we never actually mess up, right? Because we just do better tomorrow. And it's not about dramatic difference. It's about continual improvement. It's about continual growth. I mean, everybody here is a graduate of the university. You're here with the Alumni Association. So I assume you actually do some lifelong learning. That's continual improvement. I went to coach training 15 years ago, and every year I take more education so that I can be a better coach for my clients, right? I look at the ways that I do things and I think, is there a better way to do it, right? And all successful businesses continually improve. I mean, just think about how small continual improvement in just the world has changed our lives, right? Like, imagine if you went to the grocery store and they didn't do any improvements since they opened in 1935. Okay, so all of the groceries had stickers on them. So it took a while to get on the shelf because they had to put a sticker on it for the price, right? And the cashier had a very rudimentary cash register that was really nothing more than a calculator, and they ring each thing up and you had to pay with cash, right? And that's not even how we buy groceries anymore, right? And so it's this idea that if you are continually improving, continually getting better, you continually get more productive because you figure out how to do things better. My son is 29 and he is, just kind of starting out in his good professional life. And he will call me with questions. And he's always like, how'd you figure all this? How do you know all this stuff? And I'm just like, I just learned it over time. Like, I continually improve, right? And I'm 58 now. Well, I'll be 58 next week. So, I mean, I'm really good at this point, right? And I don't make excuses for it. Like because I've always tried to continually improve, I have a lot of knowledge and I have a lot of skill. And, but I'm also, by the way, acutely aware of how much knowledge and skill I don't have. So that makes it fun. And the older, depending on where you are, continual improvement can be, professional education, or it can be, learning learning how to play guitar or something like that to just continually improve yourself. But continual improvement is the key to productivity, because, by the way, if you don't get better, you never increase your productivity at all. So I just try to approach every day is, how will I be a little bit better today than I was yesterday? So will I learn something new? Will I try to be kinder? I always usually have something I'm working on to improve in my own life, right? Right now is kindness. I think I'm just trying to be kinder, even though I think I'm generally kind, but not in the way people expect. So anyway, so the 5 that I shared with you here, let me just go back to remind you of these 5. So you can practice these 5 today, and you will find that your productivity goes higher. So get in touch with your strengths and lead with them. Practice gratitude. Appreciate the things that you have and the things that people do for you, and vocalize that. Do a little bit more than paid, or do something good just for the sake of doing good. I can't tell you how good that makes you feel. Go for the gusto. As long as a basic need is met, go for the maximum rather than a satisfaction. And then work to continually improve every day. You will be surprised at how much more you get done when you just start behaving in these ways without making any other change. So I also want to remind you that I call these things practices. And this line, why do you think they call it the practice of medicine, is something one of my clients said to me, and it just changed my life. So obviously, as you can tell, my client was a medical doctor, and I had something going on with my shoulder. I had something in my shoulder that was interfering, causing pain. And a couple of doctors had different theories about what they were going to do with it. And my client said to me, because he had a wellness practice, he said, I think if I inject my smart lipo solution into your shoulder, it will melt that thing in your shoulder. And I said to him, do you think it will melt it? Or do you know, are you just practicing on me? Are you just experimenting on me? And he said to me, why do you think they call it the practice of medicine? I'm always experimenting on all of my clients, and that's how I get better. And I was like, it blew my mind. It totally blew my mind, right? Because trust me, I never saw a doctor the same way again, right? But these are practices, right? You practice altruism, you practice gratitude, you practice getting better every day, you practice leading with your strengths, right? You practice maximizing. And the more that you practice them, the better that you get in them. And they don't take your time because they become part of who you are. So I am launching some roundtables in September. I think I had a date. I don't know where I wrote it down. It's like September 14th. It's a Wednesday where we will actually meet in small groups, 30 minutes a week to practice these practices, all 14 of them. So it goes for 3 months, and we get a group of people together, 5 to 6 people in a group. We go real in depth on the practice, and then everybody has an exercise that they try for the next week to implement it in your life. And we come back and check in. So if you're interested, those are launching in about a month. If you kind of like this idea of working on yourself rather than the task to increase your productivity, if you're a Terp alumni, you do get 20% off through my Coach's Corner. So you could just send me an email and I'll send you details on that. I put the date on here, 9/14. So they'll be meeting every week on a Wednesday. They're 30 minutes. They're real fast because it's the idea to like just get it in, get it out, get the concept and go practice it. So we've got like 12 minutes left, maybe. Here's my contact info. I'll leave that up for a minute or so. But if you've got any questions, I want to open it up for some Q&A.
Sure. Well, hopefully everyone can join me in giving Angie a virtual round of applause. I know I can do mine, but please give a virtual round of applause to Angie. That was just such a joy personally to learn from you thus far this afternoon, Angie. And I'll let the questions come in through the chat. But the first one I have for you is around the going for the gusto kind of idea that you have around productivity. I feel like that could sometimes be misconstrued as maybe doing more than, or doing too much, I guess, is what I've heard from folks. So how do you draw the line between, doing more than, just your job description to increase your productivity without potentially going overboard? And that's a hard one.
Well, there is a balance here. There's a good question because there is a line for sure. And you've got to learn to say no, right? Because doing more than paid doesn't mean saying yes to every single thing that comes your way, right? And going for the gusto can be misinterpreted, but not in ways that you think. It's funny. Like I said, I always dress, and when I used to be less virtual and out in public, I remember sometimes I showed up for a meeting and I was expecting it would be a little bit more casual than it was. And I said to whoever invited me, I was like, oh, you didn't tell me I should have worn a suit. No, I was wearing a suit, by the way. And she said, oh, you didn't tell me you were wearing a jacket. She goes, I knew you'd always be all suited up, right? So they recognized that I was going to go for the gusto, and they just, they were like, for them, it saved them time. I don't need to tell her because I know she'll look right. So there's a line. I mean, you don't want to be the crazy person who always does everything way too much, right? And I didn't talk about this, but perfectionism is the enemy of productivity. But I think that if you embrace never-ending improvement, that is the way to get over perfectionism. Like, I can launch the website today because I can just improve it every day. I don't actually have to make it perfect before I launch it, but there's a line. You have to find your balance for sure.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I just wrote that nugget of wisdom down. Perfectionism is the enemy of productivity. Another one for you, I'm sure you've gotten before especially with your clientele that manage teams or are, C-suite level, things like that. How do you kind of take some of these findings in productivity and coach some of our leaders and managers to support their direct reports or their teams to maybe increase their productivity?
So I actually, with my clients, I try to turn these into practices that they implement throughout their company, right? So it's not actually just something that they do. So like one of my clients, we just had 20 people go through the Strengths Builder workbook so that they could all, identify their strengths, and we could actually figure out who was in the right role or who might need a realignment. Gratitude is a workplace culture thing, right? So you can teach people to practice it. So it's funny. One of the things I've been teaching my clients where that lead big teams, and this is so funny, is if you have managers that never talk to you, you'll love this, is they seem surprised when I tell them that if you really want an effective team, you should actually talk to every member of your team every day. So whether that is, a little text or whatever, I mean, it doesn't have to be, but you should check in with them every single day. And they're like, I don't have time to talk to everybody every day. I'm like, I'm not talking about an hour. I'm talking about like, how you doing? What's your priority? What are you working on? Like they are the inhabitor of the productivity because they're not building because one of the tips is to develop positive relationships. They're not developing the relationship with their team in a way that creates productivity throughout the company. So my theory, which I'm, experiment on my own clients with their knowledge and consent, right, is that these are practices that can be implemented throughout the entire company. And then the entire company is lifted up. I mean, I worked for one of my first jobs. It was in high school. Actually, if I think about it, both my jobs in high school required this. So I worked at Roy Rogers, one of them, and I worked at this shoe store was the other. And the shoe store was the first one. And they required you to greet every single customer. So you were supposed to pay attention for when the door opened, and you were supposed to look up from whatever you were doing and say hello, or at Roy Rogers, howdy partner. That was not fun, right? And then when they left, you were supposed to, thank them for coming. So at the shoe store, it was, hey, thank you for coming, right? And at Roy Rogers, I'll never forget this, it was happy trails, right? Right. So those were practices that were, those were some of these things I'm talking about, right? And it's funny too, because you can't, as an employee, now more at the shoe store, this was true too, but more so at Roy Rogers, because you literally had to say howdy partner and happy trails, right? You can't really be in a bad mood when all day long you're like, howdy partner, happy trails, right? Right. So it increases everybody's, headspace and makes us all more productive. So
I love that. Howdy partner. We'll sign off today with happy trails. Well,
happy
go Terps
trails.
and happy trails. One more question for you. I know we covered this in the beginning a little bit, but for some of those that are really just new to this journey of productivity, what would you say are some of the telltale signs that you're not being productive, or things that people should keep in mind moving forward, and they should say to themselves, hey, I can tell right now, either I'm not in flow or I haven't been productive this past couple of weeks, these past couple of months. What are those big signs?
So first of all, productive people do have a plan for every day. So if you don't have a plan for what you're planning to get done, you're not productive. And it's true that that's a key fundamental part of productivity. So I teach people, what are the 5 things you're going to get done every day? So number 1, do you have a plan? And then the other piece is, you should be able to know your pace, right? So you should be able to work out a plan. Now, I do not achieve my plan every day, because trust me, some days my plan's lofty and I put stuff on my plan that I don't really want to do, and then I make up excuses not to do it. So we all have that going on, but you should know your productivity. Like, I know that for me to I do a business tip, for me to write a tip and create the graphic and get it scheduled, that should take me about an hour and a half, right? I know that's how long it takes. What the days it's 2 hours and I'm not done, I'm like, okay, you are not being productive. So if you have a plan and you're not achieving it, right? If you know how things long take, I'll tell you what are there's funny little subtle symbols that you're not being productive. If you're hanging out on social media, if you're refreshing your email, if you're doom scrolling, if you're hanging out at the water cooler, if you're making up excuses of other activities that are, keeping you from doing what you're doing, then you're getting in your own way, right? And that's really what we do. We get in our own way, which is why I teach people to be more productive by changing who they are rather than the way they approach the tasks.
I love that. And I think, some of the ones you mentioned about hanging at the water cooler or, doom scrolling, many people, their minds go straight to that, but the plan and how long it takes you to accomplish kind of your day-to-day activities, I think is a really helpful sign that I wouldn't have thought of. Well, I
Yeah,
think
because
I'm
we
gonna,
don't think about it, Ellie, but it's true. We do
no.
know how much we can get done. So why don't you pay attention? Are you getting it done or not?
I mean, I wrote that down. You should know your pace. And if you're not matching your pace, and of course, I'm sure with your expertise, I'm sure you would say not every single day is going to be the exact hour and a half that it takes. I'm sure it fluctuates a little bit, but I'm sure there's a switch in your head where you should know, okay, this took a lot longer than it normally would. I should start thinking about what that means for my productivity.
Yes. Yeah. And I do that. Like, I'll be like, I mean, there's days I'm like, I'm not getting anything done. And it was as soon as I had that thought, by the way, as soon as I had that thought, I'm not getting anything done, this is taking too long. Then I stop and I go, why not? That's the next question I ask. Why not? Right. And then I figure out, like, and some days it's like, you're just procrastinating because you don't want to do it. And I need to give myself a little kick in the butt and, move forward. And other days it's like, you know what? You're exhausted. Maybe if you go take a nap for 30 minutes, then you'd be productive in the afternoon. And, that's usually the case if exhaustion is the problem. So
Yeah, maybe you need to step away versus trying to push through and not reach your productivity level. Yeah.
Yep.
That's great. Well, I think I'm going to wrap things up here. We got some great questions and the whole presentation was so wonderful. So thank you so much. If I'm practicing my gratitude, thank you so much, Angie, for taking your time with us today and sharing your expertise. I will be sharing all information about Angie, Radical Success, her new roundtables that she's launching in September. So you can find all of that great information and access the recording to this webinar via email with the email all of our Terps here used to sign up today. But any other words you wanted to leave your fellow Terps with, Angie, before we sign off?
So here's the thing. We're talking about productivity today. And one of the real secrets is this: never beat yourself up. Even if the day, don't beat yourself up for not being productive enough. Just change who you are. Do better tomorrow, right? Like this negative self-talk is the biggest killer of productivity out there. So just turn that voice off and do better tomorrow.
Yes. Well, thank you again so much, Angie. Happy early birthday. Your birthday's next week. And go Terps. Thanks to all the Terps who joined us today. And we will see you again next time. Have a good one, everyone.
Great.